What's up everybody, 40 the Broadway Saiyan here, and welcome back again to my YouTube channel, this time with another video on Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. In today's video, we're going to be continuing my The Art of series. This time we're going to be focusing on The Art of Fang. Fang is due a C90, a rework, and as well as the debut of her brand new LD weapon on Global Opera Omnia. As always guys, I want to remind you that besides myself, there are other content creators that create content for these type of videos. Be sure to check them out in the video description as well as the pinned comments. Some of them are more in-depth than mine if you're looking for something more in-depth, so definitely do show them some support. And as well as don't forget to check out your resources such as the compendium and all that good stuff that I will also be linking down below in the video description as well as the pinned comments. But without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Fang with The Art of Fang. Now, just a little bit of an overview for those of you that might be unfamiliar with this character. Fang is a hybrid damage dealer, having access to both melee and ranged brave damage. Her EX in particular is actually ranged. The rest of her buttons are melee, but that just makes her hybrid, having access to both melee and ranged brave damage. She focuses on debuffing, disrupting, and launching enemies. She has two stances that are related to buffs, which is Saboteur and Commando, and if one is active, the other one will be dispelled, and vice versa if you activate the other one. And what these do is they do influence her brave and HP commands. Now we're going to go ahead and start off by talking about her rework. So the first rework is going to be on her skill 1 Umbral Vise. This now gets plus 5 more uses. It deals 2 HP attacks now with HP splash damage, and there are more potent max brave and defense down debuffs that are inflicted when you are using her skill 1. Her skill 2, which is going to be Whirlwind, also gets a rework. It now has 3 more uses. It deals 3 single target HP attacks. It now heals her allies, Brave, based on the HP damage she deals, and this will now always initiate the launch sequence even if it doesn't break enemies. Before you needed to break enemies with this, but now you don't need to. It just automatically will launch. Now the C65 does get an extension upgrade with the C88 extension. It now provides her allies attack up, and it provides the entire party brave damage cap up. So to start off this demonstration, let's just go ahead and go with her C65 first. Alright, and then what I personally like to do, because as you could see, Fang has 3 debuffs at the start of the quest. She has 2 stacks of her EX buff. She has the skill 2 buff, which is the commando buff, and then she also has her LD buff, and we're going to touch up on that when we talk about her LD. So since she already has her LD buff and we get the benefits from it, what I personally like to do is just start off honestly with her skill. In this situation, I would start off with her skill 2 because there are already debuffs applied to this particular battle here, so we're going to go ahead and just do that. And what's cool about her skills is that if she does break targets with them, she will be granting herself an additional stack of her EX buff, and you want it to go all the way up to 5 stacks, because what that does is it'll give her access to the plus version of her EX, which is generally the button that you want to be pressing most with Fang. So we're going to go ahead now with Vanille. I'm going to just pop this a mid-Italian call so then enemies don't disrupt us. And as you can tell right here, I am taking a Final Fantasy 13 themed team, just because why not, right? Alright, with Vanille, let's go ahead and jump right in and use her EX, and then with Snow, we're going to go ahead and just use skill 1. Alright, and then when we get right back to Fang, we'll start talking about her EX, and we'll talk about her LD. Okay, so EX is not active yet. That's alright, but let's just go ahead and touch up on it anyway. So you're going to be using the plus variant of this more than likely, because when you're playing as Fang, you want to get her to 5 stacks of her EX buff as soon as you can, which is not that hard to do, and then you'll get access to the EX version. But the EX version of this, which is the plus version that you want to pay attention to, with the C85 extension, is now going to be dealing 3 HP attacks with HP splash damage. This heals the party's brave based on the HP damage she deals, and it also initiates the launch sequence. Pretty simple upgrade from the C85. And now let's go ahead and touch up on the LD, since we can actually press this button with this demonstration. So the LD actually is quite loaded. So first off, it deals 4 split HP attacks, so it's her highest damaging skill. It inflicts her generic debuffs, which are M-Brave, defense, and speed down to all enemies, and then it grants her first LD buff. And the reason why I say first is because there's another LD buff attached to this, and we'll get to it when we talk about it. But her first LD buff is called Devastation. She gets stolen, max Brave overflow up, HP damage up, Brave damage up on debuffed enemies, and then while she's inflicting a debuff, she's going to be inflicting another debuff called Daze on enemies, and then while she is initiating a launch, she will grant herself Power Chain, which is the other buff that comes from this LD. And now we're going to go ahead and touch up on what this particular debuff and buff does. So the debuff Daze, it does Brave damage resist down, HP damage resist down. Enemies cannot act while they have this debuff active, and get this, it lasts for 3 turns, so that's pretty powerful. They can't act, they're taking more damage, and it lasts for 3 turns. If you ask me, that's quite powerful for a stun type of a debuff, and it's framed. And then the LD buff 2, which is Power Chain, which she gets while she has Devastation up and while she's initiating a launch, it just gives her more attack and also HP damage up. So it's a pretty loaded LD in terms of what it does for Fang. You know, she gets something when she's debuffing an enemy by inflicting that really powerful debuff, and then whenever she launches, she gets another buff which amps up her damage. So it's actually really good, if you ask me. It's a very powerful skill. Let's go ahead and just take a look at it here. Looks really cool. And she launched, and because she did inflict the debuffs, she is inflicting that Daze, and we're gonna get to see that in action here. We're gonna get to see that Daze debuff in action. Hopefully this, actually I hope that Rem mannequin doesn't kill us, because this orb is actually lethal. It'd be really funny if it killed us here, but here we go. We'll get to see it in action here. Okay, and then let's just make sure there's no high turn rate. Okay. There we go. Yep, no acting. As you can see, Daze is kicking off. They are unable to act, and they're taking more Brave and more HP damage. It's a pretty powerful debuff, to be quite honest, and it's not that hard to inflict when you're using Fang. Now, I would try to use the EX, but honestly, with the upgrades that it gets, it's really not too important. But just know that it deals more HP attacks, it heals the party's Brave, and it also initiates the launch sequence. So that's another way that Fang can initiate launch. So what are my overall thoughts about Fang with these upgrades? In summary, I think she's a solid character with fantastic tools to disrupt and debilitate enemies. She's now a great option for a launcher because her skill 2 no longer has that requirement to break enemies to launch. She just will launch with the skill 2. Damage output, I will say, can be a little bit on the lower end because the most HP attack she has is 4 with her EX. She does benefit from characters who can battery, so if she has characters that could battery her right before she's actually able to press one of her buttons, definitely beneficial for Fang. Keep in mind she has 4 buffs to herself and 4 debuffs, so you want to be careful when running her with other support or debuffers. Now granted, a majority of her debuffs are generic, so even if you, let's say, run her with another debuffer, if they have better versions, they're just going to override it. Just make sure that you're able to get her Daze debuff off, because that's super important for her kit. And then as far as her buffs, I actually want to downright say that her Commando and Saboteur are not nearly as important anymore. They give attack up and max Brave up, but it's really not that important, and it changes the properties of her Brave and HP commands, but you're not really going to be pressing that with her. So I would honestly, if you overwrite that, it's what it is. But the rest of her buffs, which is her stackable buff, which comes from her EX, and the 2 LD buffs, you definitely want that active on her. So be careful when running her with other support and debuffers. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, her EX and LD buffs are pretty important for her overall output. So just make sure that those are active. And something that I did forget to notate is that her LD will not give her a stack of her EX buff, so make sure she gets to 5, so then that way you'll always have access to the plus variant of her EX skill, so then that way you're capitalizing on the amount of damage she could actually do, because you're usually going to want to press her EX, the plus version of it, and then her LD. Alright guys, well this is going to go ahead and conclude the Art of video for Fang. Hopefully it helps you guys prepare for her upgrades that she's going to be getting Global Opera Omnia, and also help you guys formulate your own educated decision on whether or not you're going to be investing in Fang. Thank you again for watching. This is 40 the Broadway Saiyan signing out. Mahal, everyone.